Hey everybody, it's Monday. I'm Lawrence Prezman, the Prez, co-founder of Wager Talk Media, owner of wagertalk.com, sportsmemo.com, and now the Gold Sheet. Bruce Marshall with us, an absolute iconic figure in this industry. Truly amazing what an honor and privilege it's been to host Meet the Experts. Bruce, we had Dave Koken on, Brian Leonard, Jim Feist, Ralph Michaels, Tony, yourself. I got Mark Lawrence tomorrow. I mean, dude, this is literally an all-star cast of icons.
Well, one of these days you'll get someone under 60 on with you here. So we've got the seniors group all ready for you. But no, good guys. I mean, these are guys we've known for years and good friends, all of them. And it's good stuff that you have here on Meet the Experts. It's really good stuff.
Bruce, what do you think about the concept of bringing Jim Feist on our show and Mark Lawrence tomorrow? I mean, these are competitors of ours. Something other companies of our ilk do not do.
Yeah, but they've both been around so long, and I've known both of them for years, gosh, and they've got interesting. I think what you're doing here right now, there's no games going on, and you want to have something that's interesting for people to watch. And we'd like to hear what Jim says. You'd like to hear what Mark says, because they're interesting guys too. Nice guys too. Mark, another of the Cleveland Brigade, by the way. My mom's from Cleveland,
yeah.
And Ralph, and all the guys. So it's good that with the Cleveland, Brian Leonard. I mean, a lot of Cleveland.
Yeah, and actually, that's gonna be one of my first questions to you, my friend. Before we get there, I just want to let everybody know, guys. This old man that is not that old that we're looking at is Bruce Marshall. He has been in this industry for 40 to 50 years. He has done more radio and TV than Brian Williams and Anderson Cooper. There's very few people in this industry more knowledgeable, more articulate than Bruce Marshall, and we're going to talk about that. He is a handicapper. He is a publisher. He has written books. He has more books lined up. He's hosted political talk shows, sports shows. He's written the Gold Sheet since 1981 or something like that. He's written soccer articles. He's got family scattered all over the world. This is one extremely knowledgeable expert, and it's an honor. So my first question to you is, what is in the water in Cleveland? Why is Jim is on, and he's talking about the Pennsylvania corridor, and Marco and Gianni is from that Pennsylvania corridor. Yeah. Yourself, Ralph Michaels, Mark Lawrence, and on and on and on. There has to be a reason why that sort of Michigan, Cleveland, Philadelphia sort of region is really, the birth of sports handicapping.
Well, most all of us left. I think Phil Steele's the only guy left up there. I think he's still in Cleveland, but all of us have left. It born of frustration. A lot of these guys are Indians fans, and you know how much suffering they did over the years. Browns fans since the mid '60s, they've been suffering. So I don't know, but it's just kind of coincidental, I think. But it's not a coincidence that most everybody has left Cleveland and they're scattered around the country. Some in Vegas, some in Florida, like Mark, some elsewhere.
But Bruce, it cannot be a coincidence. It's too big. There's too many. Yep. You're literally, if you take a look at sort of the most iconic figures of all time between yourself, Phil Steele, Mark Lawrence, Jim Feist, literally the grandfathers of this game. There has to be a reason they're all from the same area. It cannot be a coincidence.
Well, you might be right, Lawrence, and maybe it's just the sort of a fan that is bred there early on. And that,
just a miserable, unhappy fan who can't watch his own team, so he has to become a sports bettor.
That's part of it. That could be part of it, yeah. And it's that Cleveland thread through a lot. But, there's good fans everywhere. But it is interesting. A lot of us are, I talk to Mark and I talk to Marco, and it's like I'm talking to myself. So, there's a lot of similarities between us, but it's good fun. It makes for good discussion for sure.
Bruce, if you want to just bend your camera, let's see a little bit more of you here. Oh my, what the hell? Bruce, you're wearing a shirt and tie? No. That's there we go. Stop. No, up.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, good enough. What's up with the shirt and tie?
I'm on a show, and I thought I should get dressed up.
Well, I got to tell you, the tie knot is exquisite. It looks like a half Windsor or maybe a no Windsor, but you did a great job, and the shirt looks extremely ironed.
Well, yeah, I haven't had to wear a shirt like this since the last video we did before the shutdown here. And this tie dates to the Clinton administration, so it's like most of my ties have been around a while. But I thought, I'm going to be on the air, so I should get dressed up like I do for the video. So I don't have my Mr. Rogers sweater on, which Kelly and Minty got a big kick out of. But anyway, I thought, hey, I'm on. This is always a big deal, so I like to get dressed up.
Yeah, so Chris from Wager Talk, who never shuts up in these chat rooms, says you're the best dressed guy. You win the award. It goes to Bruce. Chris, I would disagree. I think my T-shirt, lack of shaving, and baseball cap look incredible. Bruce, me and you met about 18 months ago, and I told you I was going to get my hands on the gold sheet. Now I got my hands on the gold sheet. It was a roundabout way, though, but it is really a privilege to be one of the custodians of a company that you were so instrumental in building. Tell us the story, man. Tell us about the gold sheet, how it started, how you joined, and really how it became such a iconic, foundational publication in our industry.
The gold sheet, it's an interesting story, Lawrence. And I've known you for years. And even long before I first met you, the gold sheet was already established, and its roots actually go back to right after World War II. And it's Mort Olshan's baby. He was the founder of the company. Now, after World War II, he had a variety of jobs, but he wanted to get into this sort of a field, and it was obviously much different then. He worked in Minneapolis for the Minneapolis line, which is where a lot of the point spreads used to originate from, and for a man named Leo Hirschfield. And so the green sheets in Minneapolis, Mort was part of that in the early 50s, and there was a variety of things going on in the 50s with the Kefauver Commission and other things that were sort of clamping down a bit on the whole sports gambling thing. So Mort had to move kind of quickly and ended up settling in Los Angeles and began the publication called The Gold Sheet, which wasn't called The Gold Sheet at the start, but it's called Nationwide Sports back in 1957, and ended up within a year or two changing its name over to The Gold Sheet and using a gold paper because his wife suggested a different color and a different name. But its origination really comes in its form, nationwide sports publication, The Gold Sheet's 1957. And Mort was the guy for all those decades. I joined Mort in 1981, right out of college. It's funny because it was like a Supreme Court appointment working for The Gold Sheet. I was the baby when I got there. And I was the baby at the company and up until we actually sold last year, if you could believe it. Nobody left there. But so they're sort of like my family. Yeah. But Mort passed in 2003, but we had purchased the company from him a few years before. But we've done a variety of things throughout the years. We kept the Gold Sheet going. I had to change it somewhat and reformat it as the internet age came upon us. But we've had other publications, the Confidential Kickoff, Confidential Tip-Off, the Gold Sheet Extra featuring the technical report, something I started in 1982. We had a soccer publication that looked like Pro Football Weekly back in the early 2000s for 7 years called European Soccer Weekly that was totally my baby. That was a good fun for me to do, but it was a lot of work, but it was really interesting. But so 1957, I mean, we're still doing it. We're into our seventh decade now. Last season was our 63rd publishing year, and looking forward to another season in the fall. If we can get it going, we'll be there.
We will be getting it going. I want to welcome our listeners. The director, his governor might loosen up lockdown restrictions on May 8th in Pennsylvania. Well, good luck with that. And Kane, love seeing you on. Thanks for joining us. Nothing's up. Happy 420 to all of you guys. I don't partake, but I know that a lot of you have been rolling the gunge. So do one for me, please. It's been a long while. Probably did more guns than all of you combined over a 25-year period. I was a full-on hippie, Bruce. I mean, 64 Grateful Dead shows, 4 Pink Floyd shows, 16 Allman Brothers shows, seen Neil Young a whole ton of times. Never saw one of them sober, so I understand 420. But
Wow.
we all age and we all mature and we all start getting our act together. So not that
Good
if you're
stuff.
doing it, you don't have your act together, but man, I had a hack like nobody's business, man. I would just do a pull and then cough my guts out for 5 freaking minutes. So I had to stop. But everybody, I hope you enjoy 420 for 2020. We'll never get it again in our lifetime. Bruce, we're going to ask you a lot of questions, a lot of advice about how to win. But first and foremost, Rick Alec, our fearless CEO, told me that you are catching up on your Andy Griffin shows. Now, I have not heard that from anybody else. I think there are people who could be your dad that are not catching up on the Andy Griffin show. What the hell? Dude, do you know Netflix and Prime exist? Do you know there are shows like Fauda and Money Heist and Homeland and Game of Thrones and
Sure.
Banshee, and I really liked Hannah. There's shows on Amazon, Jack Ryan, Treadstone. Is the Andy Griffin show so gripping that you had to watch it for the second time?
Yes. It's that gripping. But I watched some of those other things too. Andy Griffith is on Netflix. When I saw it there, I thought, oh man. So back in the 60s, I used to watch, Andy Griffith. And I mean, most of them I hadn't watched in over 50 years when I was growing up.
So you didn't know the endings?
Oh, yes, I did. I have watched several Andy Griffith reruns. You are correct.
Yeah, Jacob, welcome to the show. And I quit on Money Heist too, Jacob. I got 4 episodes in and I felt like I just didn't care about any of the characters in the show. Go ahead.
Let me give you one Andy Griffith note that nobody here realizes. Do you know he had a stage show in Las Vegas with Don Knotts and Jerry Van Dyke in the late 60s. He was a headliner act at Caesar's Palace and Circus Maximus doing the Mayberry thing with Knotts, and he brought in Jerry Van Dyke to do the show. Now, that was the year he left the Andy Griffith show, and Ken Berry took over, and it became Mayberry RFD. But he and Don Knotts had a show, like a nightclub act. They would go around the country, and they were a headliner in Las Vegas and packed in Caesar's Palace in the summer of 1968, doing the whole Mayberry routine. It was really interesting.
Yeah. So I only know Don Knotts from Three's Company. Just like to talk to our listeners as they log in. Patient Picker likes Ozark. I quit on Ozark episode 8, season 1. I found the show to be really, really slow. It just kind of, nothing happened. And I'm like, I value my time too much. As far as Bosch goes, Patient Picker, never seen it, know about it, not going to watch it. And Chris at Wager Talk, Succession does not sound like a show that is one for me. I am going to start The Man in the High Castle tonight. I watched a movie last night, Bruce, you would love it. It's called Just Mercy with Michael B. Jordan. Outstanding movie. I mean, literally an incredible true story. I highly recommend you guys check that out. Bruce, talk to me about how the hell these people, myself, everybody, how do we win in sports betting? I mean, it used to be about 1% of all sports bettors won. It's been moved to about 3 to 4% of all sports bettors win. It's still an incredibly low percentage. What is everybody doing wrong? What can we do right?
Patience, discipline, money management, and even then, that doesn't guarantee everything. I think you just have to keep your wits about you and not try to catch up too quickly when you fall behind. You're going to have losing streaks in this stuff, and a lot of people end up sort of going haywire when they start to lose and they try to catch up too quickly. But it just comes back to your information that you're following and that you're acting upon has to be good. But it's really discipline, keeping your wits about you, and being patient. If you're.
But what does that mean, Bruce? What does being patient mean? I mean, to me, it means don't get greedy. Don't do these 8-team parlays. Oh, we have a book. We have a book coming our way. Talk to us.
Yes, we do. Well, patience just means don't try to make everything up immediately. I mean, you're going to have losing streaks, and just be able to. Don't bet more than you can afford to lose. Now, we wrote this thing several years ago. It's called Winning Theories of Sports Handicapping. And this is something that I put together.
Show us how big it is.
Gold sheet years. Well, it's sort of like a handbook, and it. I'm trying to get the right.
So did you sell it on Amazon?
No, we don't. We should redo it. We also had this other book called The Best of the Gold Sheet from years past.
So which one of these books that you're showing am I one of the co-owners of?
We haven't published these in a long
but
time.
Are they the Gold Sheet books or are they Bruce Marshall books?
None and all, I guess.
Rick Alec, calling Rick Alec. Let's get going, dude. Let's publish those books again. Gives us a hell of a lot of credibility.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'm game.
Well, Mort used to have the Winning Theories of Sports Handicapping, which was his book that he wrote. But it goes over a lot of pitfalls that guys do that people lose. There's one quote. We used to put these things in there. We call them requotables. And one that I particularly liked was from Minnesota Fats, the old billiards player. And he says, you don't learn from smart people, you learn from idiots. Watch what they do and do the opposite. So many people lose their discipline when they bet, and they start. I think a lot of it comes down to that. It's money management. It's betting too much. It's trying to catch up too quickly and getting kind of crazy with this stuff. Keep your wits about you. And I think that's step. If you don't have your wits about you, it won't matter how well you pick, because you're going to have a losing streak at some point. And if you lose your discipline, you're going to end up blowing your bankroll at some point. So I think that's the first step. And then we'll worry about the information, getting the picks right later. But guys who've done this for a long time, Lawrence, and you've known some of them too, and Feist could tell you stories, Mark Lawrence, a lot of people. Guys can win, and they pick more winners than losers, and they'll still lose money.
It's so funny you say that, Bruce. I want to touch on that topic. I just want to welcome Mike to the show from Ottawa. He wants baseball to start, but he's smoking a ton of the weed. And, of course, it's probably Canadian weed from BC, so it's the best in the world. So, Mike, enjoy. Jordan, appreciate your shout-out about Banshee Season 1. Great recommendation from me. Season 2 is better, and Season 3 is even better, so enjoy that. Bruce, what you're saying... I mean, it's 100% right. And I tell people this all the time, picking winners, that's not the key to winning, even though it sounds counterintuitive. How many times do you release 4 plays on a Sunday, go 3-1, and a customer emails you saying they parlayed it all together and they lost? Or worse than that, the loss came on the Sunday night game, and they rode the entire winning of the day on that one game. Sure. Money management, learning how to bet, learning how to become a winning bettor is actually more important than where you're getting your information from and whether your information is accurate or not. That stuff will come later. The foundation to being a successful bettor is to know how to bet.
Absolutely, Lawrence. You're very correct. And what you say is so true. And what I said a moment ago, you guys can pick more winners than losers, and they'll still lose. You just have to have, it's like doing a budget for your own personal life, your own financial life. You have to have sort of a plan going in money management. Like anything else, when you're spending money, you have to have sort of a plan. So I've seen so many people end up losing because they don't have enough discipline managing their bankrolls, and they'll end up blowing it because, again, like we said, at some point you're going to lose, and you have to make sure you come out of that. Live to fight another day.
Bruce,
and I've seen more bankrolls blown than we can count.
Bruce, do you think over the years that the general public are becoming wiser bettors on a whole?
I'm not sure about that. It's possible. The fact that more people might be betting now, I think, negates some of that. And there's a lot of people in there doing and just kind of going head first into it because it is kind of a heady thing. It's fun, especially when you win. You might be thinking that you can do this all the time. It partially the longer somebody does this and the more seasoned they get, I think what you say might be true. I think they start to figure out, hey, if I'm going to continue to be able to partake in this and enjoy it, I better have some discipline and some good money management doing. But so many people are starting to get involved in this stuff, and they just lack that at the start. So as you talk about the whole pool, the whole example pool that we have here, the whole sampling, I'm not sure that's the case yet.
Bruce, lost my train of thought. It does happen. It's from the days of the gunge.
I'll take your word for it. Okay.
Yeah. So I had a follow-up question to that, but it's gone. So, yes, I remember.
Yeah.
40 years ago, information was impossible to get. We already had a listener right at the beginning of the show. The director said he used to have a reserve. He used to have to reserve a copy of the Gold Sheet because they were sold out in 2 minutes.
Yep.
I know as a Canadian, it was very tough to get. I mean, you had to literally wait in line at your local store, and it was gone in 5 minutes and nowhere to be seen again. My question to you is, the difference now is there's information is everywhere. It's readily available. I mean, from, the Gold Sheet to Ralph Michaels' tip sheets on a daily basis. Mark Lawrence writes stuff, Big Al, everybody's writing stuff. There's how-to videos all over the place. There's VSiN dedicated 24/7 channel for anybody who wants to have a nap. There's so much information out there. Is that better or worse or indifferent to the general public?
It depends on how you disseminate it. It's sort of like the general news. There's a lot more news shows on now than there used to be. Cable TV. I mean, growing up, we didn't have this many outlets to watch. So it just depends upon how you disseminate it. What is different, though, Lawrence, and you touched upon it a bit, is just the whole information age here has made a lot of this information more readily available. And it basically comes back to the internet. And it's very interesting how we used to get information in the old days at the Gold Sheet before.
Tell us how you did.
At our fingertips. Yeah. We would have over the years through our subscriber base and people we talked to, we would get a nationwide base. First of all, as scouts, but they would be people either who shared the same passion we did. Sometimes they may have connections to the teams a little bit more, at least know what's going on. To give us more on-site information. We weren't able to get newspapers from around the country every day, and news items like Yahoo and whatever, ESPN, didn't exist back then. So we would have to get, we had to scour for our information sources. Now, we would subscribe to various newspapers around the country, the Sunday edition, and we wouldn't get it until, say, Wednesday of that week. But it would at least give us a lot of reading material we wouldn't get. Different Sunday editions. We get the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We get the Des Moines Register, which was a great sports page in those days. We get the Chicago Tribune. We get the Philadelphia Inquirer. We get a lot of papers. We probably have 10 or 12 delivered to us each week. This is actually also, Sonny Reisner was one of the great, early handicappers, 60s, 70s from the Castaways here, and even back before that. And one of the ways Sonny used to get information, he had runners out at McCarran Airport who would actually go onto the airplanes as they were being cleaned and get as many newspapers as they could find every night and bring them back. So he could get Cleveland, Cincinnati. He could get the Plain Dealer from Cleveland, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He'd have 25, 30 papers. So that's how you used to get information in those days. You had to get very creative about it and then hope that your sources there would be able to give you some information as well. But it was a lot more difficult to get information than it is now. 200 times more difficult, more than that even, because right now at tip of our fingers, we can get so much info that's on the web. But in the old days, we really had to look, and we had to really, cultivate a network of sources and information because it just wasn't as readily available.
No, I'm with you there. Everybody, thanks so much for logging on, checking out Meet the Experts. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell. We got a big week lined up today. Today was 1 o'clock show. Drew Martin and Teddy covers the Sports Memo podcast. They spoke about the NFL draft, and they also did some win totals for the NFC West division. Tomorrow, Meet the Experts with Mark Lawrence at 3 p.m. At 1 p.m. is Drew Martin, Ralph Michaels, and Rob Vino, the college football show. Wednesday at 1 p.m. is the soccer show. Same with Friday with myself, Nick Borman, and Carmine Bianco. Wednesday afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern, is our most watched show. Gianni and the Girls, I call it that. Others call it Straight from the Strip. Gianni, Minty, and Kelly. And then Thursday is Betting 101 with Minty and Teddy. And, of course, 3 p.m. on Friday, the Pony Pundits. What does Mike Durden ask? Prez, shows like yours help a lot of average players. You and all your guys give good info and explain it so the average person can understand. Mike, I don't know if you took spelling in school, but regardless, I greatly appreciate your comment. Yeah, that is a mess. Explain. EXPLANE. Mike, I'd like to play you Scrabble for a lot of money. I will give you 4-1 odds. Nothing, Bruce? Nothing about how he spelled explain?
Maybe his spell checker might not have been working.
We're going to give him that. But either way, Mike, we love having you with us, and we love your sentiments. I can't thank you enough. Bruce, do you think the betting habits of the general public have changed over the last 40, 50 years? And I'll give you an example. I know in Muhammad Ali's prime, a lot of the sharp bettors were betting minus 1200s, minus 800s. They weren't shy to make those bets. You don't see that as much anymore. So if you could speak to that. And also, were there more parlays? Were there more teasers? I know in-game has changed a lot. What have you seen with the betting habits?
Well, the last thing you said is really the most seminal change, I think, in the business the last 5-6 years is the in-game. That's changed so much, and that was a foreign concept for decades, and that's changed so much. I think the number of offerings, though, and in-game is part of that, but the teasers, the parlays, the fact, Las Vegas is a good barometer for this and a tracker on how this market in Las Vegas, the physical market, the brick and mortars market in Las Vegas, how it has changed over the decades and how hard it used to be. Hotels and casinos used to not have sports books in them. There were a few sports books out on the Strip, the Del Mar, the Santa Anita. There weren't sports books there in Caesar's Palace, and there weren't sports books in the Sands in those days. That changed, and once it became more mainstream, there were more of these sorts of bets, more of the exotics became available. So there's the offering, the menus are so much greater these days, and not just here, but overseas as well. I know we have, Carmine can tell you, some of the betting that goes on overseas with some of those sports books and the soccer, the offerings they have, the internet has changed the game completely because you're able to do so much more on there and you can have so many more propositions and things. There's a lot more. I don't know that it's better or worse. If people are winning more or losing more, I tend to think they're not winning more, but the template has changed because it has been expanded so many times by a factor of 25, 30 or more. 50, 100, I don't know. There's so much more available now. But the internet is also responsible for that too, and what the ability to actually house all these bets, and it's changed the landscape dramatically.
Okay, guys, I just want to apologize. I was being an idiot to Mike. I'm sorry. I know it's your spell check, dude. I was just trying to be funny. And, well, Comedians don't get it right all the time, and especially amateur ones who think they're comedians but aren't. So shout back out to Mike. You're greatly loved. Bruce, what did you do before this industry?
A long time ago, Lawrence. I thought I was going to be a play-by-play man. I did some of that in college. I thought I was going to be a player at one point, and I thought I would go to law school. I actually did for a little bit right out of college. I worked in sports information, though, at Long Beach State, and it's funny how I ended up actually getting into this business. I went for a short while into law school, then decided I didn't want to do that, and wanted to get back in the sports thing. When I first got in, was looking to get in, was back in 1981. And I actually had a chance, it looked like, to join, and I thought I'd go the public relations route, the natural progression from sports information. So the Oakland A's were about ready to bring me on board as a public PR intern in the summer of 81. But if you recall, that's when the big strike happened. And they stopped playing baseball in June of 81, right before I was going to go up to Oakland. So I wasn't working. So then that avenue was closed. But right about the same time, the only non-team that I wrote to was the Gold Sheet. And Mort, because I had read it, because my dad had read the Gold Sheet. And I actually went up into L.A. to meet with Mort. And Mort thought that I reminded him of himself when he was young, and he ended up hiring me that year in 81. So it's funny, that was the only non-team that I was to get into this business. It was all going to be the public relations angle, but instead I got into the sports wagering angle. And that was really a blessing, because then I got to see the whole spectrum of sport instead of just focusing on one team like that. So that was good. But that's how I got in. It was if it wasn't for the baseball strike in 81, I'm not sure. I mean, my career, my life might have been much different.
Yeah, amazing. I had no intention of getting into sports handicapping either. I just, whole thing happened accidentally. I think that happens for a lot of us. But unlike most of the guys I've interviewed, I really wasn't a sports bettor prior to entering this industry. When did you start making bets? Were you ever a bookmaker? It seems so many of the guys were taking bets at high school, running parlay cards, etc.
No, I wasn't. I mean, my dad bet. I mean, I was aware of it. As soon as I could go out to the horse race track, I would bet. And when they lowered the betting age to 18, I was going out before I was 18 to bet at Santa Anita and Los Alamitos, because I looked a little bit older and I was taller, and I could get away. It's like drinking, Lawrence. I drank more before I was 21 because it was fun. It was a challenge to get liquor and find somebody who would sell to you. I probably drank more before I was 21 than I've drank in the 40 years since. I swear to God, because then it wasn't a challenge anymore. But anyway, back to betting. Horses I did, and some, but not. I mean, not a super big. I never have been a super big bettor. I'm more of a writer, and so most of the stuff it goes back to what I do with the Gold Sheet, with the point spread and the betting in mind. But at the bottom of everything I do, all of my stories and all my game write-ups, and I try to make them kind of entertaining, I want to make it a good read. And it comes across that I'm aware of what I'm writing about, but I have to try to make it sound a little bit more interesting, and I'll put in some other references and analogies and, modern commentary on what's going on in the world in some of the write-ups. So I try to make it a good read as well. So I think that's always what has been a little different about how we write it's how I write it. And a lot of this stuff can start sounding repetitious after I
love
these games.
Bruce, I love the way you write. I find there to be humor in your writing. I like the pop culture references. I think you're one of the most interesting writers in our space, and our space can be dry. I mean, let's be honest here. We're talking about trends and stats. It's very math based, and I find your stuff to be just an excellent read all the time. There's just humor to it.
It lends itself to it, and and there's so many things we can write about. I mean, if a team is, if a team is more a conservative offensive approach, I might make a joke. Yeah, Pat Buchanan's a new offensive coordinator for Wisconsin or something like that. I mean, I might throw something funny like that. It makes it a lot more interesting to write. And the funny thing is, I don't know what I'm going to write when I start. It just comes to me as I'm writing it. I don't have a plan. It just sort of comes out, and a lot of these pop cultural references seem to show up because they fit. But I'm doing this really quick. And like I said, I don't know what I'm going to write about beforehand, specifically how I'm going to structure each write-up. It just sort of happens when I'm at the keyboard.
Bruce, do you have any? I want to ask you a question Jordan asked me, but you're probably better in answering it. He asked, have I ever placed a bet that is lost and then it comes to light that the event was fixed, such as a boxing card? Jordan, the answer from my perspective is no, that's never happened to me, but Bruce has been betting longer than I've been alive. So perhaps, Bruce, you've experienced something like that.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I have specifically. I think it's probably happened and we just don't know about it. That's one of the things that we write about significantly in some of these publications I showed you, like the Winning Theories booklet that we have, and the fixed game, which is really a nice scapegoat for guys who lose. They always want to think a game is fixed. It's very interesting. When I went to one of the sports gaming conferences in New York last year, one of the integrity guys from BetRadar was there, and believe me, they are very into it, and a lot of soccer overseas, tennis, whatever, and football, basketball, whatever. The guy from BetRadar told me, he said he has never had one of these claims of a shady or a fix come to fruition from an observation from somebody who thought the performance in a game indicated that there must be a fix in. He said the only way you can ever monitor that is if you monitor the way the money moves. He said, there's so much inherent in sport. I mean, because it's sport, there's going to be differences in it. And there's a lot of rumors out there. I won't say it's never happened, but it just hasn't happened as much as people like to think. I think there's some very interesting stuff. I want to do some more research myself. 50 some years ago in football, I mean, there's some very interesting things that went on that I think need some more explaining. I've touched upon it briefly. AFL late 60s. I think there's some ground to be cultivated there, which I intend to do one day, but I've just sort of nibbled around the edge here. But something was going on, I think, at that point, and certainly there's indications that things went on a lot more earlier. But have I ever been directly impacted by a fix? I don't think so. But then again, I don't think any of us would know.
Yeah, and that's true. And right now, there's still obviously fixing going on. I mean, we've had a lot of cricket situations. Every 2 or 3 years, somebody in cricket gets busted. I don't know if they're specifically fixing the games, but they are providing a lot of information on
manipulating.
Sorry?
Yeah. Manipulating.
Yeah. And especially on how dry the wicket is and et cetera. And I know that, sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
Well, the other, to your point there, and what the BetRadar guy was making a point, and this makes sense. He says the higher levels of sport, I said, it's very rare because there's so much money already involved there. How much can be bet to influence a guy to manipulate a match? It happens in lower levels. It happens, soccer, for example. He said it never, English Premier League, Serie A, Liga, Bundesliga, it won't happen there. Down lower, in friendly games, exhibition matches, referees can be tainted. There's a lot of, they're really looking a lot harder at the lower reaches where players are more, apt to be corruptible there. With so much money at the big levels, it doesn't make, you'd have to be betting a lot of money to get anybody to risk it who's playing in the EPL or Serie A to risk manipulating a match like that. It happens at the lower levels generally.
Yeah, and we hear that about tennis too. Some of the lower level tennis tournaments, the ones out of Kenya, et cetera,
Yes.
So we do hear it. I mean, it's still a buzz that goes around, but predominantly, like what you said, the major sports that 99% of us bet are not being fixed. Bruce, a couple of questions, then we'll call it a show. I want to thank everybody for logging in. What is your handicapping philosophy? I mean, we've spoken to a lot of people throughout the last month or so. Some are tacticals, some are seeing eye test. Everybody's got a different sort of way to approach it. Tell us about yours.
I don't know that it always works. I mean, it does sometimes and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm constantly trying, recalling what's happened in the past, and I've seen things before, and mainly on streaks that teams are on, teams that are likely to go on these big updrafts, and conversely falling off a cliff into the abyss. And I'm always sort of trying to fit what's going on now into what I've seen before, and that seems to dictate a lot of my thought on this. I'm trying to look for things that have happened before and seeing if I'm seeing.
So are you studying Kansas City under Joe Montana for their first year?
I might not necessarily go back that far, but it can go back in recent years, and sometimes it might.
Well,
go
I
back
guess
that far.
there's a few of those, right? New York Jets with Favre. Denver with Manning. Now we got Tampa Bay with Brady. I mean, it has happened. I just don't know if it's happened as late in a career as. I mean, I guess Peyton Manning's probably the only real. Well, Favre was pretty old.
Well, yeah, but it's also in the college sports, and it's with coaches.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm thinking coaches are actually what I look at more. There's more patterns and behaviors with certain coaches and how they've done it. I will tell you as well, and I am hoping like heck they play preseason football this year. Our best thing at the Gold Sheet for many years, it certainly was last year, because I think you can really get some definable edges in preseason. You really find out, and you kind of know which coaches want to win and some that don't if you have a working knowledge of a roster. I have always thought preseason football is the best option for a bet. You can find more edges if you just do a little bit of work and you look back, because it happens like every year. There are certain coaches, certain teams take it more seriously. You have to know the quarterback situations and all that. But in that realm, history means something. So like I said, I've always thought preseason football is a great. It doesn't apply to baseball and basketball as much. Preseason football, it does.
Bruce, the director asks, and David Golden, thanks for logging in. I don't know what you just said, but there's $3 signs. We all like that. Bruce, the director asks, what is your preferred sport to write about and wager on?
Probably to write about football, I think, just because I've got so much in my mind going back all these years, and that's what seems to jump up. I write all these retrospective pieces in the summer for the Gold Sheet, a lot of college football stuff, so I can do a little bit more of a historical link, I think, to football. Actually, betting, I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes back and forth. I mean, sometimes soccer, actually, hockey. I think you might be able to find some edges there. The other thing, talking about fitting trends in there, hockey, you see some incredible trends, especially on the totals sides there. I mean, there's these straight under and over trends depending upon the team. They can go on 12, 15, 18 game stretches. So identifying streaks, and I seem to have a better feel for identifying hockey sometimes, and it's cyclical. Soccer is very interesting too, because there's different wagers there, and I think there's 3 different results right off the bat in soccer, including the draw. But I kind of like betting those more, but I like writing about football the most.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, football's just got so many variables that a lot of the other sports don't have, and it's embedded in our gambling psyche. I mean, do you ever see a time when NFL football is not the leading sport to bet on?
No, it's always going to be the number one, Lawrence. But along with that, though, I mean, there's so much information. Everybody knows the same stuff in the NFL, and the point spreads have been kind of narrowed, so there isn't I mean, yeah, I mean, there's teams that go hot. There are better and worse teams there, but the information is very well known in the NFL. There's not much of a secret. So I generally, in football wise, college, I think, except NFL preseason, where I do think there's edges. Other than that, college football, I think, provides a little better opportunity because there's more news that you can find out that might not be as readily available that may be important. But the NFL, I mean, there's no bit of information out there that everybody doesn't know because it's covered so thoroughly.
You know, I've always been a better NFL expert than a college football expert, and for me, it's just the scheduling that gives me the biggest problems in college football. You know, we have a team, whoever it is, the Tide, they go out and destroy everybody by 40 points, and then they play, you know, LSU, and you don't know what to do.
And the point spreads are often a lot bigger in college football too. So you're dealing with these.
Yeah, are they going to pull their starters? Spreads. Do they care? Yeah. I just go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, but that's interesting angles there because there's some coaches, you know, who don't have a great track record. I mean, listen, Nick Saban's mark laying points at home is not that great. And, you know, Alabama is not a must wager. You're laying 28 at home, you know, against Mississippi State or some team like that. But you're right. There's so much more fluctuation in college football with the numbers that makes it a different challenge.
You know, Bruce, talking about coaches, and I could be wrong here out of memory, Pete Carroll, USC, that man loved to cover point spreads. Seattle, he doesn't care. What changed?
Just NFL versus college football. And for a while, Carroll had a very good mark with Seattle his first few years, and the numbers sort of adjusted, and then Seattle started to get a little overvalued. And right when they started to become overvalued, the team started to dip just a little bit. They didn't have that same defense. He did for a couple of years. He was doing the same things at Seattle. You're right, with USC for a while there, he did very well. That's the other thing, though. These numbers often, they'll adjust, and they'll the greatest example might be the year the Patriots went undefeated 16-0 in the regular season. The first half of that season, they were covering numbers left and right no matter what the odds makers put up. And suddenly the second half of the year, adjustments, the Patriots ended up laying 20 or more several times the second half of that season. They stopped covering numbers all the way to the Super Bowl. They ended up losing that one. So sometimes, you know, you can't fool the odds makers forever, and they make adjustments, and then they take the advantages away.
Jordan Kane asks, if the Jaguars come to the UK, which I don't necessarily think will happen, how much of an impact do you think that'll have on the Lions compared to playing in Jacksonville? And I mean, Jordan, if there's a team with a home field in the UK, it's definitely going to impact the Lions because you have every other team flying in there. I just don't think it's a realistic thing that will happen. Bruce?
I don't think so either. It's too hard to say, but it brings up another subject about home field values and how much they're worth. I found that to be a very, very difficult thing to peg sometimes. There seems to be a knee-jerk reaction to give teams a certain amount of points for being at home.
It's 3 in football, 4 in basketball, if I recall.
Pretty much. Yeah, and we make adjustments from there. But even then, I mean, there's teams that play better on the road than at home. So it's sort of it can be sort of a false, it's a tricky calculation to make, and it's very hard to say, you know, especially looking forward, will that be a big advantage? I don't know. But I'm like you. I don't think that's going to happen in the foreseeable future where they're actually going to go there more than a couple of games per year.
But you do actually bring up a great point, and we don't ever discuss in depth the home field advantage, so to speak. I actually feel that if you're playing a team that is going to go, you know, 13-3 in the NFL or 10-0 in college football or whatever it is, I actually think the value is betting them when they're on the road.
Yeah, because I think the home field advantage gets overstated sometimes. And for some teams, it doesn't seem to work. But here's the thing. It's sort of got to be a team-by-team thing here. And I'd be very remiss to recommend a blanket approach on home field value. You've just got to look at each team, but be very wary of just assigning a predetermined number no matter what, because these teams perform differently. Like you say, some of them play, not just some, a lot of them seem to play better on the road. So that's where it comes into knowing a team's pattern and just the personality of each team.
So with that said, do you want to tell us, any tidbits, any NFL coaches that have a trend that has stood out to you for a while that is still holding?
I'm trying to think right off the bat here. It seems to go every year. It changes a bit. Jason Garrett's no longer coaching at Dallas.
He never did coach at Dallas, Bruce.
He never did coach at Dallas.
He stood on the sidelines, though.
He did. He was there, and he was he looked like the coach who didn't do much. Sean Payton with New Orleans. There was a while. This is back to that Pete Carroll thing. For a while, the Saints were really were a good bet at home. They've been generally overvalued there. The Saints were one of these teams we talked about last year. They played a lot better on the road than at home. And I'd have to get all these notes back in front of me, but New Orleans is one that comes right to mind as a team that is overvalued at home, getting points it really shouldn't get. Last year, though, they were great on the road. They might have covered every game last year they played on the road. So that's a good example of that. It seems to be that more the coaches that you sort of go against. I was when Vance Joseph was at Denver. My goodness, he was a mess there. But yeah, that's sort of something we kind of chart as the season goes on.
Is there a difference between the older and the younger group? I mean, with the McVays and gentleman out of Buffalo, I've gone blank, and some of all the
McDermott,
these young up and comers, Green Bay. Have they shown any more or less propensity to cover spreads?
Not that I can think of offhand. Again, it's a case by case thing. Now, Sean McVay's an interesting case because here's another one I think that got overvalued. The Rams snuck up on everybody, and it took a while for the numbers to adjust. And the Rams were not a great point. The Rams fell off some last year. They may fall off more this year, but it seemed like I think that it goes back to this, Lawrence. Any of these guys can end up making an impact right away, but they have to keep doing it. Numbers adjust, and sometimes their point spread patterns will end up changing. So you just have to keep each team separate and kind of it's a blanket recommendation is very dangerous. Always, you've got to view each of these teams separately, and just sort of figure out what pattern they're adhering to, and be careful to generalize too much.
Yeah, Bruce, I think the three big teams that everyone's really going to talk about going into this NFL season is New England, Tampa Bay, and the Rams. I think we're going to actually get a lot of value on New England this year. I think we're going to get no value on Tampa Bay this year, and I think there will be a lot of value on the Rams this year. I think there's going to be a major overreaction. The Gurley's gone, and Brandon Cooks is gone, and Clowney. Oh no, he was from Seattle. But I think you're going to have value on the Pats for the first time in a long while.
Could be, yeah. I mean, they're still going to do something here. We'll see what happens in the draft later this week. They're going to bring another quarterback in. It could still be Cam Newton. Cincinnati hasn't traded Andy Dalton yet. They could have done what Carolina did and released Cam. They're still trying to trade Dalton. If they don't before the draft, they'll take Burrow. They'll probably release him after, and there will be a scramble. New England could end up with Dalton at quarterback. I'm not convinced they're going to end up with Stidham, but I think you might be right. They could be undervalued some early, but Belichick is still there. So if they were undervalued for a week or two, maybe, but I'm not sure how long it will continue. But generally, it's right. Tampa Bay, it could be some overvalued in Tampa Bay. The Rams are a tough call here because there's some things been going on in the front office there too. They've traded a lot of their picks away. They were built. Les Snead is doing a lot of the stuff George Allen used to do 50 years ago. He's moved picks out the Jalen Ramsey trade. They're without first-round picks coming up. I'm not in McVay. He was quick to throw Wade Phillips under the bus after last year. The league might be catching up to Sean McVay. We'll see, but I'd keep my eye on the Rams as well.
David Golden writes, John Harbaugh is a very good preseason coach, and that he is. I think he could be the number one preseason coach for the last little while. I know we talk about it every preseason, and like what you were saying, preseason gives us all a lot of opportunity. We all do really well betting preseason. Bruce, Jordan Kane writes, Toronto Wolfpack won promotion to the English Super League. They were due to only play home games April onwards. I live in Toronto. Who's the Toronto Wolfpack?
Beats me.
Jordan, we don't even know who this team is, and I live here. Like,
I'd like to know.
Yeah, what do they do? Anyway, my friend, anything you'd like to leave us with? What's your favorite band? What kind of music you listen to?
Oh, I'm jazz, R&B the whole way.
R&B is interesting conversation, Bruce, because especially because of our age. R&B. Oh, they're rugby league, so not rugby union.
Oh,
Did you know? Did you guys know there are two types of rugbies? There's rugby league and rugby union. Bruce, do you know the difference?
I knew there were two, but I cannot give you the specific differences other than the fact I just knew there were two different.
So rugby union is a game with flow. It never stops. I mean, it stops when the ball goes out of bounds or they have to do a kick or a scrum. But rugby league is more in the vein of NFL football. Rugby league, you get, and I could be wrong here, but you get, I think, 6 offensive tries. So when you get tackled, it is whistled dead. It is not whistled dead in rugby union. They then have a ruck, which moves the ball, moves everything back and forth until the play continues. Rugby league, they actually blow it dead. You get 6 tries, and then you have to punt the ball to the other team. So it's a little bit more.
There you go.
It's huge in Australia. It's big in England, but it does not exist much outside of that.
Which one does the Wolfpack of Toronto
Well,
play?
he wrote rugby league, but I've never heard of him in my life. Bruce, what was I just talking about before that? Music. Oh yeah, R&B. So what's fascinating to me about R&B is it has some of the very best music ever made. Al Green, Earth, Wind and Fire, Marvin Gaye, Otis Redding, Aretha, Etta James. Otis Redding, in case I haven't mentioned him, died at 26 years old. A catalog of music from the gods. And then it has the worst music ever made. Beyonce, Babyface, all of the stuff in the last 20 years. It's one of those genres where it just sits on both extremes. It has the greatest of greats and the most unlistenable nonsense on the planet. R&B does not have a good history line because it just went from the best to the worst fast and never went back.
It stopped sometime in the 90s, I think. The melodies stopped, and it sounds pretty much the same. I sound like a get off my lawn old guy talking about this, but no, I like the old stuff was great. I like some of those bands. I mean, Earth, Wind and Fire was great. I'll tell you another one. I like the Ohio Players a lot, and back in high school, when we would be taking the bus to a game, we would often break out and love Roller Coaster. I mean, we had so much fun with the Roller Coaster song. But that's my whole catalog. You should see all my CDs I've got. I've still got those compact discs, and my music thing is all R&B and jazz.
And you still use those compact discs?
Yes. In fact, when I bought the car 2 years ago, I made sure they had a compact disc. I know there's there's other ways to do it, but yes, that's my whole collection is just R&B and old jazz. Yeah.
He's Bruce Marshall. I'm the Prez. You've just watched Meet the Expert. We're going to call it a show. Make sure, everybody, to check out tomorrow's show with Mark Lawrence, and of course at 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, live on our YouTube channel. Drew Martin, Ralph Michaels, and Rob Vino talk college football. It's a great show, and Drew does an incredible job as a host. So check that out. Bruce, it's been a real pleasure. It's just such a privilege for me to be talking to guys as smart, bright, funny, articulate, and iconic as you. So thank you, my friend, and be safe during these trying times. Let's hope it ends soon and we get some sports back on.
Yes, and good fun. It's always fun to talk to you, Lawrence. Anytime you want me back, just let me know. Good fun.
Well, we'll be seeing you once sport comes back, my friend. Be well, everybody. Take care of yourself.